In the vast expanse of our existence, we often find ourselves yearning for glimpses into the future, desperate for a moment's notice of what lies ahead. Yet fate has a peculiar way of keeping its secrets close to its chest, shrouding tomorrow in an impenetrable veil of uncertainty. Or is it? Have you ever encountered an individual who seems to possess the extraordinary ability to peer into the depths of time, to witness the unfolding events of the next day with uncanny precision? Imagine if every night before sleep, instead of being lost in a world of fantasy, you were transported to the following day, shown the precise moments that would transpire. It would be like reliving the next 24 hours in a dream, witnessing both the mundane and the extraordinary, the triumphs and tribulations that awaited. This man lived this existence every night. He saw tomorrow today, but he never spoke of it until one fateful night when he dreamed of his own demise, and so the countdown began. His life became a ticking clock with only 24 hours left to live, or was it more? Tonight, the prophecy starts. There once was a man named Thomas, who had a strange gift, or perhaps a curse. Every night before sleep, he would have vivid dreams that weren't of fantastical lands or mythical creatures, but of the next day. He would see everything that happened in the next 24 hours, with perfect clarity, from minor inconveniences, like spilled coffee, to major world events, like the stock market crash. No detail was too small or insignificant for Thomas to see. Each night he'd wake up from his dreams shaken, confused, and overwhelmed by the sheer volume of events he'd just witnessed. At first, he thought he was going crazy. Why else would he dream of tomorrow with such accuracy? But as the years went by and the dreams continued, he realized there was something more at play here. Thomas tried to make sense of his nightly visions, searching for patterns or connections, but everything was random, seemingly disconnected from each other. People falling off ladders, politicians resigning, birds flying into windows. It was like fate itself was playing a game of 20 questions with him, taunting him with glimpses of the future while keeping its true motives hidden. But Thomas wasn't one to sit around and be baffled. He started taking notes, recording every significant event he saw in his dreams, keeping them in a leather-bound journal. He hoped that someday he'd look back on his notes and find an explanation for his gift, or perhaps even a way to control it. As the years passed, his journal became a treasure trove of cryptic entries, a cryptic diary detailing everything from mundane occurrences to earth-shattering events. But despite the meticulous record he kept, there was still no answer to the question that plagued him. Why was he seeing the next day every night? With every passing year, the burden of his secret grew heavier. The fear of missing an event he had premonitions about kept him constantly on edge. He couldn't relax or enjoy the present, knowing that somewhere out there a clock was ticking, counting down the seconds until the next day's events unfolded. He tried to share his experiences with others, hoping for understanding and help. But they either dismissed him as a madman or pitied him, thinking he was mentally unstable. Alone and misunderstood, Thomas retreated into himself, becoming a recluse in his own home. He stopped socializing, stopped working, stopped living. All he did was dream and write, dreaming of the next day, and writing about it. But this didn't last forever. There was a day when Thomas's routine changed. Instead of waking up from dreams of the next day, he woke up from a nightmare of his own death. In his dream, he saw himself lying on the cold, hard ground, his body lifeless, his eyes staring blankly into the sky. He saw the shock and sorrow on his family's faces as they gathered around him. He heard their cries of disbelief and despair as they realized there was nothing that could be done. He felt the pain and agony in their hearts, the emptiness and loneliness that would consume them now that he was gone. When he awoke from the nightmare, he was drenched in cold sweat, his heart pounding in his chest. It was the most realistic dream he'd ever had, so much so that he wasn't sure if it was a dream at all. At first, he thought it was just another premonition, another glimpse into the future. But as the days passed and the vision lingered in his mind, he began to realize that this was different. It wasn't just a vision, it was a prophecy of his own death. But there was one thing that bothered him about this vision. He couldn't remember the date. He had seen the date many times in his premonitions, but when it came to his own death, his mind was strangely blank. And this worried him because it meant that he didn't know when he would die. It could be tomorrow, next week, next month. He didn't know, and the uncertainty was terrifying. So he decided to do something drastic. He locked himself in his house, refusing to let anyone in or go out. He spent his days pacing his room, counting the hours, waiting for the prophecy to come true. But as the days turned into weeks, he began to lose his mind. He started hearing voices, seeing things that weren't there. He became a shell of his former self, consumed by fear and uncertainty. And then it happened. One evening, as Thomas was sitting in his room, waiting for the inevitable, he heard a knock on the door. At first he ignored it, assuming it was just his imagination playing tricks on him, but the knock came again, louder this time, and he knew he had to do something. He cautiously approached the door, and through the peephole, he saw a man standing on his doorstep. The man was tall and thin, with a sharp nose and piercing eyes. He was dressed in black from head to toe, and his face was obscured by the shadows of his hat. Thomas hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to do, but eventually he opened the door and let the man in. The man introduced himself as a representative from the government, there to talk to Thomas about his premonitions. Thomas was skeptical at first, thinking it was just another attempt to get him committed to an institution. But the man's sincerity was disarming, and he found himself sharing his secrets with the stranger. The man listened intently, his eyes never leaving Thomas's face, and when Thomas finished his story, he spoke in a low, gravelly voice. "I believe you, Thomas. I'm here to help you." And with that, the man began asking Thomas a series of questions about his premonitions, probing him for details and trying to understand the nature of his gift. Thomas answered truthfully, hoping that this man was who he said he was, and that he would help him end his misery. But as the interview went on, Thomas began to feel uneasy. The man's questions were becoming more pointed, more accusatory. He seemed to be suggesting that Thomas was making all of this up, that he wasn't really seeing the next day every night. "Why would I do that?" Thomas snapped, his voice shaking with anger and frustration. "Don't you believe me?" The man leaned forward, his eyes boring into Thomas's soul. "Why do you think I'm here, Thomas? Do you really think I'm just having tea and crumpets with the Queen?" Thomas stared back, his anger slowly turning to fear. He could tell that this man knew more than he was letting on, that he wasn't just some government agent come to help him. But then the man did something that completely shocked Thomas. He smiled, a cruel, mirthless smile that sent chills down Thomas's spine. "You see, Thomas," he said, his voice like venom, "I don't believe you, and I think it's time for you to pay the price." And with that, he lunged at Thomas, his hand reaching for his pocket. In a flash, Thomas saw the glint of a knife in the man's hand, the same knife that would soon pierce his skin and extinguish his life. The premonition of his death that he had seen in a dream was coming true in real life, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. And as the knife plunged into his chest, Thomas understood. The prophecy wasn't just about his death, it was about everything he had seen in his dreams, everything he had written in his journal. They were all connected, they were all part of a grand design. And he had been a pawn in that design all along. Now, with his life ebbing away and his vision fading, he could finally see the truth. The countdown had begun long ago, and it was almost over. Now he could see the irony of his situation clearly. He had spent his whole life running away from tomorrow, trying to escape the fate that awaited him, and now here he was facing his destiny head-on. There was no more fear, only acceptance. As the darkness closed in around him, Thomas felt a strange sense of calm wash over him. He had lived a life full of uncertainty, but now he knew the truth. He had seen tomorrow, and tomorrow had been today all along.